All right. So we're discussing group five, and this is our discussion on the types of authority and how they relate to the election and the current political state. Start off, my name's Daniel.
My name is Vonshea Spence.
My name is Bryla Park.
And I'm Siobhan Piper Smith.
All right, now, first question. What do you guys think, like, what kind of authority do you think Trump fits into, given the three that we learned in class?
Me personally, I feel like he fits more under traditional authority because he's kind of the way he talks and even his slogans like "Make America Great Again." We have to go back to the way things were. I feel like he's more of a traditional because he's set kind of in like older ways or like a certain group of people like has more power or more authority than like other groups or trying to get back to like how government was run like in older times.
I feel like he's very traditional too because he's kind of like stuck in his ways. He feel like he knows his people, and I know I saw a video of when he was younger. He was probably like 20 something, 30 something, and he was talking about how he would win over the people if he was to ever to run for president because basically calling everybody stupid, like they're gonna follow whatever I do. And so looking back at the um him running for president, like he did exactly what he said he was gonna do. And he spoke his mind, he said whatever he wanted to say, and he still became president. So I mean, I feel like he's like whatever I do, they're gonna follow me. So just keep my same way.
Right. I would say he's very traditional as well when it comes to the principle of loyalty. Like, as we all know, once he got in the White House, he did get rid of a lot of the White House staff that had worked under Obama and replaced it um, with his staff. And I think that loyalty resides in those people donating to his campaign, possibly helping him with rallies, even like prepping for debates, things of the sort. And even though those people might not necessarily be qualified to do the job that they have, since he's like, okay, you did all this for me, I got to the White House, now here's how I'm going to repay you. He gave those jobs to those people.
You're right. And just to drop a name, Betsy DeVos, she was like, I feel like she really played into that little loyalty thing because I've seen I like from seeing how he does things, he rewards loyalty, but then he kind of punishes anyone who's I would say anyone who's more on the rational side of things, doing their job or their duty, like FBI directors, they got fired because they had to investigate him. But Betsy DeVos just got her job because she gave him money.
Mm-hmm. Or a lot of times he doesn't want to take responsibility for like the things he does, like even when he has press conferences or different things like that. If like a person, somebody that ask him a question that he doesn't want to answer, like, oh, you're fake news, like next, you know what I'm saying? Like he doesn't want to take responsibility or he doesn't want to, I guess when people call him out on his wrongs, he feels like he's kind of superior. He doesn't really have to answer them like that.
I feel like Trump is kind of a mix of all of them, but he just takes them, turns them, and makes them terrible, and then magnifies it. Because I could see him being traditional because he does have this certain way of things, these customs that he thinks are right, and he wants to enforce those, and he also wants to keep these really old school practices and everything. But we've evolved since like the 60 years ago when he was a kid. Um, and I do think the spheres of personal and impersonal, they get really blurred, but I feel like his personal sphere is much larger than his impersonal sphere because he does do things for other people and he does things to make America great again. And I guess in some way he is, but for people who are like underprivileged, have less power and less money, they're the ones who are at expense. Like it comes at their expense. They're the ones who have to bear the burden. But like people who have money, power, and privilege, it's no problem for them. Like it's fine for him to go out and do these things because they're not going to get affected at the end of the day. It's not their fight. If anything, they might benefit from it some. But I feel like those two spheres, they're like at ends with each other.
Or kind of not just traditional, but I feel like in certain ways he's charismatic because to his supporters or to his voters, they're very loyal to him because of the things like he appeals to them. He's charismatic towards them, towards what they want to hear. They're like loving it. They're kind of like eating up everything he says because like the people who have the same mindset as him, he's kind of like appealing to them like, yeah, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that, and kind of we're gonna be on top again. Now that's why I feel like it's been like recently it feels like so many things are happening so openly now than what they were used to happening. It's kind of because they're kind of feeling like Trump's highest person in office and he's been doing this, so maybe it's our time now. Like, we can finally start doing what we've been thinking. You get what I'm saying? So I feel like in a way he kind of appeals like in the charismatic authority to certain people.
And I also feel like with that charismatic authority, devotion plays a big part in it. Like you were saying, not necessarily on a rational or reasonable basis, but we have to kind of look at Trump's voter basis. Like, why did they vote for him? A lot of people voted for him simply because they didn't want a woman in office. A lot of people voted for him based on, oh, well, Hillary's going to run the country the same way Bill did, so no. And a lot of people, I think, got too far ahead in terms of what his abilities were. Because if we look at Hillary Clinton, she was in office under Obama. She was a first lady. She had hands-on experience politically. But because this man is a businessman, he has X amount of money, X amount of power in the business world. People are like, okay, yeah, that's what we need. We need someone with power. We need somebody with money that can like dish out all these millions and take care of everything. And now it has to kind of do with those signs too. Like, okay, yeah, he had the signs. Okay, yeah, he's got power. Yeah, he's got money. This, that, and third. It'll be fine. And so people are like, okay, yeah, we're gonna take those signs and everything he says. We're gonna eat it up, and we're gonna pursue him as our authoritative figure. But then when I felt like the signs came after his deemed success of becoming president. Like people were like, oh, when he says like the disrespectful things about transgender people or LGBTQ people or black people or women or things like that, people were like, okay, well, people are entitled to free speech. Many people say things like that, so let's not focus on that. And then when he gets in office, and then there are bigger issues that present themselves in the same way, such as like, the transgender ban in the military or DACA right now, things like that. Now people are like, okay, now the signs are a little bit bigger. So now people are starting to rescind from that. But at this point, it's like too late.
Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot as far as charismatic authority goes, I feel like people might view him as a prophet or a savior or a hero, I guess. I wouldn't use any of those as to describe him because he's not doing anything for me or people who look like me or people who choose to express themselves the way I express myself. But he regurgitated all, because he pretty much just took all of these thoughts that people were just sitting on and spit them out, but he did it on a platform, and he had the money and power to kind of back up what he said rather than the knowledge and laws. And everybody was like, ooh, well, he's saying it. Or it's like, ooh, they're like Trump saying things and he's just not afraid to speak his mind. Neither is an alcoholic, but you don't see an alcoholic president. And then they're like, ooh, you know what? He gets me because he thinks like me. But there's a reason that people who think like Trump aren't getting as far as Trump has gotten. And I also feel like that's the danger that comes with charismatic or like with all these authority types mixing, into one big hodgepodge mess, because I feel like for the most part he was relying on the charismatic authority and his followers' devotion to get him to where he's going. But like a cult, when the devotion disappears, like we learned in the class, when the devotion disappears, the cult just kind of falls apart and they just kind of disband. But since he built that up and I got into office, and he like how I feel like the devotion disbanded because when he did things like the travel ban, he pissed off a lot of his followers because they were like, because their family members were stuck overseas and they were like, what are you doing? This was your laws weren't supposed to affect us. You're supposed to help us.
Right.
And then like Caitlyn Jenner, when he did the trans ban in the military, she was like, Trump, what are you doing? Call me. So now they're just sitting down, not knowing what to do. But even if their devotion disappears, his position of power is not going to disappear because we're a rational and legal system. So they voted him there. So now he's stuck there until he either gets impeached or runs out his term.
Right. I feel like with those fears, like you said, they definitely do mix, and I feel like the charismatic and traditional ones are significantly bigger than the rational ones, simply because he kind of passes, like, makes laws for whatever reason to promote his interests. Like, okay, for example, let's talk about Obamacare. Okay, it's a health plan, so people are covered with costs should they need surgeries, medicines for things of the like. And that was in the interest of everybody. It wasn't like, okay, well, let's just make let's just not make Obamacare one thing that could benefit just one specific group of people. It benefited the entire country, and that's rational because Obama knows that he has the knowledge, like, okay, there are people who can't afford to get medicines if their child gets sick or if they get sick. So let me create a plan that will work for everybody so that everybody can get what they need and have that. With Trump, it's like, okay, let me do what is best for people who I know will benefit from this. And he doesn't necessarily take into consideration everyone's needs. And I feel like once he got to that position of power, I think it kind of like hit him, okay, I have to be rational, I have to be this. But what he's thinking is rational to do as president is not necessarily like rational for what the country needs, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm kind of glad we have this system of checks and balances within our government, because a lot of the stuff he tries to put forth into action or put forth into laws does not go through. Because that the House, the Senate, the judicial branch, legislators, etc., are like, okay, this isn't what being in America is supposed to be about.
And kind of back to the dedication thing, I was reading this news thing, and it was basically saying how this woman, she was like a diehard like Trump supporter, and she voted for him and everything, but turns out she was a person who used Obamacare, and her like medicine and the treatment that she needed to stay alive was like afforded because of Obamacare. And now when he tried to repeal it, she was like, well, basically without it I wouldn't be able to be alive, like I wouldn't be able to live. And now it's kind of like, well, this is what you voted for. You knew the type of person that he was, and you knew the leader that he wanted to be. So it's kind of like, this is kind of what you get.
And they didn't follow any of the negative signs that were also blatant. They just kind of looked at those. Like when he said "Make America Great Again," they were like, "Ooh, okay," but he never really said who he was making it great for, or how he was going to make it great. He just had a quick, catchy one-liner that caught on, and it was easy to repeat.
Yeah, because it was very misleading. Because when you say "Make America Great Again," okay, it's like, well, America is very diverse. We have people from all sorts of races, ethnicities, backgrounds, things like that. So when he promoted that slogan and used that for his campaign, everybody automatically thought, okay, he's going to do something that's going to benefit everyone. So let's go for that. But nobody had any knowledge or there wasn't any real substance to what that meant.
Mhm.
It was just like, okay, we're gonna build a wall, and that's supposed to keep America great because that'll give Americans jobs. Yeah, but at what expense?
Mhm.
Families getting deported, losing jobs that people need in order to survive, in order to thrive here in America. So I feel it was there was a lot of things that were said that misled his followers or the country, for example. So I think that's kind of like the terms that people accepted his authority on. That's like one of the things they said when it comes to analyzing the systems is on what basis do you accept like the leader leading? And I think people accepted it on that basis that that term was so broad and so like overarching that people were just like, okay, like when you think America, you think the entire country. You don't think like, okay, well, only certain groups of people. Then people just took whatever he said and ran with it.
And I feel like that's where, because looking at the rational and legal part, I don't think Trump is a rational nor a legal person. I think the only thing legal about the campaign process was how it went. Like as far as what they had to do, what audiences he had to pander to, and how he got in the office. I mean, I would say that was pretty legal, and even then, I can't say that with 100% confidence, considering there's a whole investigation about it. But all things considered, I think that's the most legal and rational thing about him, and even that was questionable. And like looking at the types of authority sheet that she gave us. When it comes to laws and knowledge, I don't think he's not knowledgeable about the laws, and I don't think he really knows how they're actually made. And as far as being impersonal, he's not. He takes like everything is personal to him. I would say because he's not putting his country first. He's putting himself first. Like I remember he said he got stressed out and took a vacation, but this was like after he had spent like weeks golfing on our money, on our tax dollars. But it's of course, being the president is gonna be a stressful job, but you can't just take a vacation.
Right.
You can't just go golfing. And as far as duty comes, I feel like that's a really kind of blurry line because he does things, but it's not for the greater good of everybody, and it's not necessarily morally correct. And I'm like one aspect of duty is kind of being morally correct, I would say, but or doing what you have to do to get things done. And I feel like I feel like he puts his attention on the wrong things, or from my perspective, the wrong things. But for him, I'm pretty sure he might think it's completely fine. Like with all the hurricanes coming, with Harvey, because Hurricane Harvey left, but Houston still has there's a lot of things going on in Houston, and then Irma like swallowed Florida. Jose was behind Irma. Katia formed in the Gulf. California's having a whole bunch of problems. They're on fire and they haven't had water in months. And Flint, Michigan still ain't got clean water. But with all these things happening, rather than trying to like literally do a press conference or release a statement talking about how to fix it, or even, and I think he did give a speech somewhere, but he said all the wrong things as he usually does. But rather than handling all these problems that Americans are facing, and that's just with natural disasters, and like just make sure you can live in the state you're in, he decided to try to repeal DACA, replace and repeal, or repeal and replace.
Right.
And that's not if he wanted to do that, if he wants to do that, I'm not going to say let him do that because, I'm going to protest against it. But do it after the fact.
Right. That's where I think like his like priorities are sort of messed up because when it comes to like anything socially, related. I mean, like you have interest oriented, value oriented, affectional, emotional, and traditional. Like it's a mix of all of those, but I think his things are guided by his emotions or how he feels about certain things. Like for example, um, there was just an incident on ESPN where this lady was asking, or somebody was asking the coach, who was a woman, about something like maybe politically related. I don't really know all the details, but I know that she had called Trump a white supremacist, and that got out. And Trump like responded almost immediately. Was like, okay, well, I want her fired. She has to issue an apology. This, that, and the third, and like going on Twitter and tweeting about it, like we're still in high school and somebody just made you mad type, and that just kind of shows like, okay, he's guided by emotions. You're worried about what people are saying about you. Meanwhile, there are states that need help, that need aid, that need relief. There's countries that need help, need aid, need relief. When I say countries, I'm talking about Mexico, because they had the earthquakes and everything. And despite all the stuff that Trump has said about, Mexican people, Mexico as a country building the wall, things like that, Mexico was still offering aid to people in Texas, to people in California who might have been displaced due to the forest fires and things like that. But when Mexico had their earthquakes and everything, and the U.S. Trump didn't do anything to try to help Mexico out. Mexico like rescinded all of their aid. So now nobody is helping them type. And now people within our country are starting to realize, okay, this is a sign that this is not what's supposed to be going on, like, if that makes sense.
And like I said before, I feel that's the terrible thing about it, is because he was relying on, I would say he relied on the charismatic authority that he displayed, which is the most irrational, but he tried to apply it to the most rational type of authority.
Right.
So he just kind of coasted and just barely made it. And then he now he has now that he's in power, it's not like we can just take it back. Like I said, it's not like a cult. Like, people can leave, but he'll still be the president. People can decide to not follow him anymore, but he'll still be the president. So, you can't retract your vote once it's in there. It's not like this is the really rigid structure. So we can't just break it down so easily.
Right, and it's unfortunate that he doesn't even have good backup. So it's almost like people are settling for him because say that, okay, we do get Trump impeached. Okay, who comes next? Mike Pence. And Mike Pence is way worse. And then, you impeach him, you got the next person who is no better. And I think that's another reason on the terms that people accept his authority, because they're like, we know what's coming after him is going to be worse. Like, no matter what who comes after him, it'll be worse. So in a way, that's how people are analyzing, okay, well, even though Trump is doing a horrible job at running the country, he's not really helping us. I mean, we're taking what we can get because we know what the next person is capable of based on things that he said. Because Mike Pence has said a lot of irrational things, a lot of unethical things. And now it's like a situation, okay, well, who can we tolerate more? And unfortunately, that answer is Trump. So I feel like that's the way people analyze his authority. Like, well, we're settling for this because we already know, Mike Pence is terrible. So, yeah.
And I hate that it's come to that. But Trump also, I feel like he challenges people who speak out against. I feel that's where loyalty comes in again. Like what you said with the woman who called him white supremacist, and then he was just like, well, apologize. But I feel like he challenged people who were disloyal to him. So I feel like if the American people were to question him, call and question him, and question his power and his legitimacy as an authoritative figure, I feel like he'd be like, well, let me just show you how much power I actually have.
Mhm.
I mean, it might not be a whole lot because there's, other branches of the government that'll put him in check. He still has some degree of power that we can't even call into question. So, and I feel like that's where the whole the personal aspect of it comes into play, where it's like you call him out and he's like, okay, he'll call you out again, but we'll call you out like during a press conference or like from the White House. And it's like, and then he feels like he's won in the day, but he's just further like,
Like digging himself into a deeper hole.
yeah, like he's getting his hands dirtier in a sense because it's like he's like, oh yeah, well I showed you, but it's like you shouldn't have to show me anything. You should have showed yourself in the election, and now you're president, and you feel like he feels the need to have to show up and like another citizen who
Right.
he's supposed to serve.
Because now it's almost like he talked himself up too much. Like, okay, I'm going to do all of this. And then once he got there, he didn't do it. And then once that happened, it was like, okay, well, now people are looking at him like, now what? And like I said, now we're stuck because we impeach him, we get Mike Pence, and that really is no better. Versus, Obama was like, oh, yes, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help our children. We're going to get you guys educated, things like that. He got to office and he did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And
also people kept, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
Yeah,
people
yeah.
kept calling the question how Obama did things. Because I do think, I feel like Obama is the exact opposite of Trump. I feel like he's not much of a traditional leader, but he's a charismatic leader. He takes everything from a charismatic leader and a rational leader and like exemplifies it in the most glorious way. But people people always focus on things Obama didn't do. But just like how Trump tries to do things and people were like, why didn't you do this, Trump? Because he couldn't, because everyone shot him down. People shot down because when Obama was in office, I think the House was mostly Republican. So
it's hard for him to pass.
yeah, he couldn't pass the things he really wanted to pass because they didn't want him to pass it. But what he did get through was really effective. Now, the same thing's happening with Trump. People aren't calling into question his legitimacy. Well, people are doing it, but his followers aren't calling into question his legitimacy of to be a president like they did Obama.
Yeah, I feel like he was mostly when he got there. I don't feel like he was expecting to win. So when he got into the office, he was like, okay, wow. And then it was like he had no experience. Like he wasn't used to being a politician. He's never been a senator, worked under a president either. He's a businessman. He's not a politician. He's not a world leader. So it's kind of like putting somebody in their element they're not good at, and then they're just doing, well, it's not really putting because he kind of put himself there, but it's just like he's doing horrible at it because he kind of doesn't know what he's doing.
Like he bit off more he could chew. Like he was like, I feel like he was just like, let's see how this goes. And now he's here. And now he's like, oh, well, what now?
Right. And so now he's kind of like, when I was talking about the whole being interest-oriented thing, I think he's like using his own personal interest, his own personal agenda that he had before he even got to the White House is trying to exert that as like the country's best interest when that might not be the case. Because, there's a certain level of rationality you have to have. Like, okay, this is what I want to do, but this may not be what's necessarily best for the country. So now I have to change it into something else. Well, Trump has the idea, well, this is what I want to do. I'm president. This is how it's going to be. And then there's so much damage that is caused after that it's like he doesn't know how to like bounce back from it. It's like he keeps trying to do things to get himself out of the hole when in reality he's like digging himself even deeper into it. So
yeah. So any closing thoughts, comments, concerns? No.
No.
Okay, well,
No.
that was our discussion.